From the Journeys of Belonging to Blackness digital media project, I'm Yndia Lorick-Wilmot, and you're listening to the podcast, Talking Journeys of Belonging to Blackness. Joining us today is Alicia Anabel Santos, also known as La Santera. Alicia is an Afro-Latina author, playwright, writing coach, a fellow podcaster, teaching artist and activist, as well as a film director and producer. She is the founder of the New York City Latino Writers Group and a National Book Award faculty member. For over a decade, Alicia has created and nurtured safe spaces for emerging and established writers to nurture their creativity. Whether she's a frequent guest speaker and workshop facilitator for universities and nonprofits across the U.S., or a guest on shows like NPR's Tell Me More, Alicia's work focuses on topics that intersect identity, religion, sexuality, feminism, and social justice for people of color, and particularly women of color. In addition to her 2011 memoir, Finding Your Force, A Journey to Love, and her play production and one-woman show entitled I Was Born, Alicia's work has been published in magazines such as Latina Magazine, Glamour, Domino, and Business Week, and most notably her essay, Two Cultures Marching to One Drum, appeared in Urban Latino magazine. In addition, Alicia wrote and produced the documentary entitled AfroLatinos, An Untaught History, with director Renzo Davia, which is a film that intends to build awareness and help give voice to a large community of African descendants in the Caribbean and Latin America who've been silenced and historically marginalized. More recently, Alicia has launched a new business venture that allows her to blend her spiritual practice with her writing and community empowerment work called La Santera Spiritual Consulting. And I can't wait to learn more about that. But right now, let's welcome La Santera, Alicia.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me on your show. I'm so humbled to be here. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing in elevating and celebrating our voices and our testimony. And so, yes, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to share a bit about your work with our listeners. You know, what's so funny is that I'm always intrigued by our guests who are also engaged in projects designed to educate and uplift African descended communities. And so you seem to do it all. And so I appreciate your kudos to me too. But Chow, I think your intro is probably one of the longest intros I've given to date. I'm like, what is she not doing?
Sleeping.
I guess, but in all honesty, your energy that's infused throughout the work, whether it's through pen or, you know, really keyboard, but at this point, but through pen, on the screen, in your performance art is quite powerful. And you connect very well with people. And I know I'm not alone when I say this, but your messages resonate deeply. And I think it's because you are an effective storyteller. And the care you take and the time you make when helping others feel empowered to tell their stories. I mean, it makes sense that you are considered by many in the community a writing midwife.
I just think about the moment that I realized that I was a writer, like all of this, when it comes to like, how do I come to, as a Dominican, as an Afro-Latina, to the fullness of myself as a Black woman? How did I get there? Where did it come from? The journey, it's been a journey of identity, self-discovery, and self-awareness. And so I'm a person who grew up in Brooklyn in the 70s, right? And so there was no Latino. Like, I start off with that. Like, when you come up in a space where you're not even sure where you fit, you were either Black or you were white. There was no Latino. We were not even on the census at that point. And so I wasn't light enough to be white, and I wasn't dark enough to be Black. And so I immediately come up in elementary school not having a home, not having a place, but I knew I was more Black than white. I've always known that. Whatever that word minority meant then, I was a part of that group. I was definitely not in the in group. I was always in this like space of, let me be here because this is where I feel most safe and most seen. And then you go through your high school years, and I went to predominantly white school, and I grew up in a home where you're taught you marry white because marrying white is right, and it's about aclarando la raza. So
Mm-hmm.
now you're being told, you're being taught and programmed and conditioned to believe that, okay, you don't want to identify as Black because white is where it's at, and here is where you will excel and succeed and not be invisibilized.
Right.
And so I immediately have this conflict, this inner conflict of, well, then who am I? Where do I belong? Where's my place? There was a long time when I wasn't even Latina, when I wasn't even wanting to speak Spanish, and it's like, I feel like I've had decades of transformation, and it wouldn't be until I came out as a writer in 2001, right? So after September 11th, that I begin to delve deeply into what my identities are. What are the things that I'm connecting to? What are the things that make me me? What do I get to claim? And when I came out as a writer, and I knew that the first magazine I wanted to write for and publish in was Essence, I knew that that was the place for my voice because it's where I felt I most related. It wasn't even Latina magazine. And there was an African American sister who said to me, how dare you want to write for Essence magazine? You ain't Black. Write for Latina. It's not your place. And the words, it's not your place, were the things that were ringing in my head like, shit, it's not my place. So what is my place? And what does that even mean? That I begin to look at, but wait, my mother's Black.
Right.
My mother's Caribbean. I am Black. And not only am I Latina, I'm Black. And not only is it my place, but it's my responsibility to really look at what that means and why it is that we were having these conflicts. So that story that you the title, Two Cultures Marching to One Drum,
Mm-hmm.
was originally titled Will the Real Black Girl Please Stand Up? And I pitched it to Essence, and Essence rejected it. They weren't with it. They didn't like the title. And what I was trying to do is bridge this Black-brown divide so that we could really have a conversation about race. But mostly what we had in common as Black people. So when it got published, it really was affirming because it allowed me to really continue to do this work. Because from that article is where I landed AfroLatinos, The Untold Story, as their head writer and producer. And I'm interviewing Black Latinos all over Latin America,
Right.
18 countries later. And this question about why aren't we talking about being Black? Why aren't we identifying as being Black? And what does this look like in Latin America, which is a completely different experience to the United States and our African American history here.
Yeah,
So,
because the racial project looks very different in the Caribbean and across Latin America, right? And just the articulation of the racial projects. And when I think about you and when I'm talking to folks like yourself who are really very unapologetically Black, because I met you and I've known you for a while, but I've known you as this person who's like, I'm Black, and that this weird juxtaposition that you felt yourself sort of traversing earlier on in life, there's a lot more clarity when I meet you in the present. And so for me, it's just like, I then wonder, all right, well, how did a person like Alicia get here, right? And what was her journey like? Because as you were saying, this is a process. That moment when you're like embracing your identity as a writer, but then embracing yourself as Afro-Latinx, as a Black person, as an African descendant. There are so many people out in podcast land listening in who are creatives like yourself and who want to be able to tell their story and their journey that might be similar to yours. And I'm like, you know what? This woman is powerful. And so here's a platform to share a story. So,
when I think about that question, what brought me here, what brought me to my Blackness, to owning my Blackness unapologetically, the first thing that came to my like lips was religion, spirituality, God. So when you're on this journey and you're having like these nervous breakdowns and life is just fucked up, and you realize that, you don't fit in this world, you're not white. You don't fit in this world. People don't see you as Black because you're too light. You've got to begin to take your identity and own it, but also prove it in some ways. People want to see that I own my privilege. also as a Black woman. They want to see that I recognize that I've had some access to things that I might not have gotten if I was 3 shades darker. Or if my hair texture was a little bit different. And I do remember early on, before I wore my hair natural, curly, when I used to straighten it out weekly, that people would respect me more when I walked into spaces. So when you say I stand in my Blackness unapologetically, it took a long time, because I had to dismantle a lot of misconceptions about process and my journey in particular. I come to my Blackness through religion and spirituality and my connection to my ancestors and my roots, and really honoring and recognizing where I come from. That's where my Blackness is born. The roots of me, the history. You know, when I think about my mother's father, my mother's mother, my mother's siblings, and this line, this lineage of African descendants that I come from, how do I pay homage? How do I connect to them? So this is where the journey begins for me, truly to understand and own it. Is I am entitled to this, to this religious practice that is Santeria, that is División 21, that is voodoo, right? Because I'm Dominican, I share an island with Haiti. And so it makes sense that all of these things are coursing through my body. I just wasn't taught how to access it, right? And so with age, I become someone who questions more, and I investigate more, and I look. And it's funny, when I went to visit my mother this summer, and we were preparing all of my first La Santera spiritual baths. The first batch had her hands and her touch all over it. And I'm doing tarot card readings and consultas the entire month. I'm there with her. Like, I'm like, Mom, I'll be right back. I have 3 readings back to back. I'll be right back. She looked at me at one point and said, I cannot believe that you do these things, because my grandmother used to do consultas, consulting, and readings for folks who would come in the neighborhood in DR, which for me was, this is my roots. This is, of course I am who I am because of this. And then I look at where I am today. I'm an Iyalocha, Omo Ogun, Enoya, and that in itself has been, we could talk about that for hours. That beautiful. Listen.
What you said is just a nice way for us to transition into our first segment. Act 1, Call to Adventure. I think about your memoir, Finding Your Force, and the ways you talked about your journey towards self-love and healing. And I think too about the work you do today that's all about using your force and the ways you draw on your inner strength, and how you use your voice. And that must have a great influence in the work that you do today. So please tell our listeners, how did you become interested in doing the work you do today? Then what motivated you or inspired you to become this writing midwife? See, these are some Oprah questions, right?
That's some Oprah, big Oprah questions right now. Listen, when you grow up as a baby of color, right? You're young, and you're in the 4th grade, and you're 9 years old, and you have this white teacher. Your first experience with knowing that you're different, and knowing that you don't belong, and your teacher is the one who makes fun of you. And I grew up in the 70s, so I remember that I was wearing in the 4th grade bell bottoms, right? And a lot of times I was wearing clothes that were hand-me-downs from people, from other folks. They weren't even like things that my parents could afford to buy, because they had just come to the country in 1968 and 1969. So this teacher laughs at me in front of the class. Everyone's laughing at me. That's all I remember, is everyone pointing and laughing at the clothes I was wearing because I was poor. And I stood at the door of the room, and I'm like, you think that's funny? You think that's funny? This is funny. And I gave her and the entire class the middle finger.
You flipped them the birds.
And I ran to the bathroom, and I was crying in hysterics, and I knew I was going to get hit. I knew I was going to get beat when I got home for that incident, but I didn't care, because what I knew was that I had things to be ashamed of. And when you carry that, into your adulthood and you're working for white bosses and you're working in corporate America, because I've had incredible positions. I've worked for some of the top magazines and publishing. I've worked for some of the top liquor companies in the country and the world. Like I've worked for corporations, like big names. And so when you work for these places and they're beating you down and these white people are beating you down, you understand that it's because you're Black and they believe they can. And you get to a place where you decide, am I this desperate to stay because I have to feed my daughter? I was a single mom at the time. Or do I leave? Do I love myself enough to say, F it, I'm done with this. I'm done with being treated badly by these people who do not value me, who do not see me, who do not respect me. And a lot of that was born when I came out as a writer in 2001. So here I am, and I'm just coming to who I am. I'm coming into myself. I'm coming into my power, and I'm deciding I'm going to take care of me. I work for my last corporation. I work for my last editor. It's 2005. I left Florida in 2000, after 2001, after September 11th. That's when I knew I was a writer. I worked in publishing, and then fast forward, I'm working for this editor in chief, 2004. I have a nervous breakdown.
Mm.
I can't I can't take it anymore. I can't get beat up anymore. And this is not why I came to New York. I came to New York to pursue writing. And so the moment that I took that identity, I'm a writer, I was standing in the fullness of myself as a Black woman. I said, you know what? I'm going to work for myself for the rest of my life. I'm never going to allow myself to be in another position like that. And the rest is history, truly, because 2005, I left that job and I wasn't working for a little while. And then 2006, I write the article. 2008, I begin the journey for AfroLatinos. I'm gone. I'm traveling all over Latin America, 15 countries. That's where I'm really delving into the religion, where I'm learning, where I'm studying. And all that time, I'm making a decision about whether or not I am going to become initiated or part in this religious practice, because there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of, am I worthy of this?
Mm.
There was a lot of having to build myself back up in this journey and it makes sense when I think about being a Black woman, and I think about our history being American also, right? Which I
Right.
don't say very often, but I was born here. There were things that I had to just deconstruct to build myself back up. And so during the film, I meet women from all Latin America who, in the first 5 minutes of meeting me, want to tell me their life story. There is
Mm.
something about the exchange that makes them feel safe. So, like, even scholars, historians, sociologists, professors, like, I would sit with them and they wanted to tell me their testimony about their abuse,
Wow.
whether it's sexual, whether it was physical, whether it's, power struggles at work, whether it's being invisibilized as a Black, like, it was from like Peru, Uruguay, Cuba, DR, Puerto Rico, Argentina, you name the country, as I'm traveling the world. And it's a lot of the same thing, and people are telling me, they're bringing it all to me to hold and help them give voice to. So you're asking, like, how my podcasts, right? So I come back with all of that on my shoulders,
Mm.
all of these women with me. How do I honor Black women, Afro-Latinos, the untold story, making sure that I'm doing justice to this 150 million people of African descent in Latin America? How do I tell their story? How do I tell their story? How do I honor that truth, even though I'm not living their experience? Because
Mm.
there's that too. I write a one-woman show. So I write the documentary. I write a one-woman show, I Was Born, where it's monologues of 7 different women that I met and their experiences.
Mhm. And it was part of the one festival, right?
Yes, it was
Hmm.
part of the One Festival in New York, which was an amazing experience. And it was performed, the one woman show was performed by on 7 nights by 7 different women who had
Wow.
memorized the entire script, because I wanted it to be different voices, different women, different experiences telling these stories. And it was amazing. All while facing eviction, all while facing not working, because remember, I quit my job to say I'm working for myself. And so a lot of like owning who I am has been how do I do this on my terms? How do I do this on my terms and hold on to some self-respect when people want to continue to beat things out of me?
Mm.
I write Finding Your Force, 2011. I wrote my memoir in a month. I had taken a month off from connecting to anyone, anything, to write this. Like my partner, Joseli, says, she says it's a 1,000-page memoir. I'm like, no, it's not. It's close to five. Um, so I wrote it in a month,
That's
and
amazing.
it was crazy.
At this rate, I should have you as my ghostwriter because I'm like, yo, I'm trying to produce something that's like 200 pages and it's taking like 7 years.
Listen, that was beast mode, but also me needing to purge all of this out. So I
Mm.
write the memoir. I write it in a month. I publish it that same year at some point. So like I finished it. I wrote it in May. I published it in August.
Wow.
August of that year, I self-published my
Hmm.
memoir. And so after you write something that major, that's your entire life story, your journey coming out as a lesbian, your failed marriage, you're being a single parent, all the ways you damage her, you're being raped and violated.
Mm.
You're like your whole journey of life, like this 20-year span. This memoir spans 20 years of my life. What's next? People
Wow.
always ask me, so have you found your force? I'm like, I'm always finding it in different ways. It's never ending. You never completely find it. I recorded Finding Your Force as an audiobook that's
Mm.
available for free on my SoundCloud. And from there, I decided that I needed to record these podcasts, these video blogs of just things that like with different topics and things that I would be going through and experiencing as a writer, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, as a lesbian, as a mom, whatever came up that day, that was the theme of the day. And I would just freestyle. I would just freestyle and just go, and until I really got my niche, right? Because I was then talking about the craft of writing, and I was doing meditations, and then I've come to a completely different place as a healer, as a curandera, as an Yndia, and I'm doing under the La Santera umbrella, right? La Santera Spiritual Consulting. I'm providing daily card readings. I'm using my social media to connect to people, mostly our people, right? Women of
Hmm.
color, Black women, and men who are really trying to connect spiritually and connect to the God that lives in them. So that's the truth of like where my work has taken me. It's I know that I went through all of this in my journey to this place where I get to share how I got there and what I know now.
So I'm gonna peel it back a bit for our audience because I think it's important to really look to that pivotal moment where it's just like, I'm going to really embrace and take on this identity of being a writer. Because I think in many ways, the choice that you made after September 11th to say, you know what, I need a shift in my life. And it's more than just, oh, I'm going to take up writing and this is a hobby. Because I think for creatives, it doesn't necessarily matter so much the platform per se, but it's there's something that's in their being. But what you did requires a set of courageous steps to take, right? To actually make a professional shift from I'm getting money, I'm doing well in this corporate environment, and then to pivot to something that honestly, to be a creative, there is financial instability in that. And oftentimes, I'm sure there may be some of us, some of our listeners out there listening in and thinking, like, I want to be a writer, and they're kind of pussyfooting around it
Right.
because it's just like to make that leap, what you did is huge. And so take us back, like what was some of the contextual things that was happening that was like, you know what? I need a change, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this full time. And this is definitely a part of my journey that I'm going to put forth, because that's very intentional on your part. And I'm sure it's more than just being an African descendant in these workspaces, because a lot of us work with, those others and we feel marginalized, but we are still beholden to that environment, but then still try to find creative patches elsewhere. But you were just like, screw it.
I love this something speaking through you right now. Damn, Oprah 2.0. That is probably, I may have said it quickly, in the interest of time, but truly one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. Right.
Mm,
So I like to tell stories and use dates. So September 11th, 2001, that Tuesday, we know that the towers come down. When the towers come down, I'm living in Miami and I'm working for a major rum company, a major rum company. And so I'm driving to the office that day, and I'm on the phone with my sister Josie, and she does her Good Morning America thing. She's catching me up on the news. She's watching the news in real time. I'm driving to Miami, and she's like, "Oh shit, a plane just crashed into the tower." And I was like, "What?" And I'm driving, and I'm still driving to work to Miami, and she tells me a second plane lands in the Twin Towers. And I'm like, shit, we're under attack. That's what I felt instinctively. I was like, oh, we're under
mm,
attack. I get to the office, and I remember saying to my boss, if one more thing happens, I'm out. I want to go pick up my daughter. I want to go be with my family. After September 11th and all of the days that follow, we are watching September 11th on replay, all of us around the world, just on a loop.
right.
The towers, the people jumping out of windows, all of that horrific moment, right? And I'm thinking, damn, what if I had died in one of those towers? What if I had died? How will my daughter remember me? What significant contributions have I made in life? What would I leave her with? How will she remember me? And I decided that I was going to write her a memoir. I did not know how to write a memoir. I didn't know how to begin to even tell a story at that point. I had no inkling internally that I was a writer. Like, I didn't know it. I didn't wake up to it yet.
Mm,
But I knew I was going to write her a memoir, because I said, if anyone's going to tell my daughter my dirt about my life, it's going to be me. And so I began to look around my bookshelf, and I had all of these books on writing: how to write, how to publish, how to get an agent, how to get an editor. So I had been collecting these books. Do you remember those little papers that you would buy a book for a penny?
yeah,
It was like a book club.
absolutely.
So I had been picking all these titles. It was preparing me, but I had no idea till I said I should write her a book. And then I love that Paulo Coelho quote from The Alchemist.
Mm,
When you want something badly enough, the universe conspires in helping you achieve it.
that's right.
There was the Miami Book Fair was happening, and it was that following month. And I'm like, and it was like, if you submit 30 pages and you get to sit with an international editor and agent. And I was like, I could write 30 pages. Like, it came out of nowhere. I took 3 days off of work. I was just like, I'm going to tell my story. And I was writing a book called Becoming Me. And I always say, um, Michelle Obama stole my title, because I had that title many, many, many years ago. So Becoming Me is okay in my skin. And I was writing about my parents' love affair. And I was reading a book called Writing from Personal Experience.
Mm,
And as I'm reading it, the lines that really, like, everyone has a story to tell, everyone's experience matters. And in that moment, I looked at my daughter, she was little at the time. She was like 9. I
mhm.
was like, I'm a writer. And she's like, I know, mommy, you're going to write me a book. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm a writer. She's like, I know you're going to buy me a house with a McDonald's in it, and a McDonald's and a Carvel. Like, she didn't get it. But in that moment, it was revealed to me that I am a writer. And once I had that revelation, I began to make moves to manifest that. And I knew that I wanted to leave Florida and come back to New York City, because I felt like New York is where I needed to be to hone my skills to really master my craft. And I just knew that New York was where I needed to be to do that. And so I began to save money, and I saved $4,000. I had a job lined up. Um, I, I had a school picked out for my daughter. She was going to be going to a private school. Everything was aligning perfectly until I made a huge mistake at my job. I was accused of embezzlement, huge mistake that I had made. So at the time, I was an executive assistant to a marketing manager for this major rum company, and I was in charge of 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 organizing this huge sales meeting for people internationally coming in. So all of the logistics, hotel, food, entertainment, all of the workshops, everything. And my boss said to me, "But I want you to have fun." It was at the Four Seasons. "I want you to have fun, have fun, have fun." And I'm like, absolutely. I had private yoga. I got a manicure and a pedicure. I got a massage. Long story short, 2 weeks before leaving, because I had given my notice, I was moving to New York. Everyone knew I was pursuing writing. I'm called in, and they were like, "Do you realize you spent $4,000 at the Four Seasons?" And I was like, "No." They made me pay it back in like 24 hours. I was escorted to my car. I was humiliated. I went home and I cried. I was devastated. I was so ashamed. I had disappointed my boss. I couldn't believe I had done that. I've always been an excellent employee, right? Because we're trained that way to be
Right.
excellent. And I'm in the bathroom with towels in my mouth crying. No one knew. My parents didn't know. I had moved in with them to save money for my move
R-
to New York.
Right. And the saving of the 4,000 went right back to them. And so,
The universe is funny, right? I will always remember this woman, the vice president of human resources at this rum company, called me a few days after the incident, and she wanted to check in and she wanted to know how I was. This is a woman who had taken me to see Wayne Dyer, who had
mm,
taken me to plays. Like, these are people who like really loved me. And she was like, "Okay, tell me what's going on with New York. What are you doing?" And I wiped my tears, came out of my hysteria, took a deep breath, and I said, "I'm still going. I'm still going. I'm going to New York. I'm still going." And she was like, that's what I like to hear." I said, "Always be a woman." This is another woman of color. She's like, "Always be a woman of your commitment.
mm.
Always be a woman of your word." And I've carried that all my life. So I appreciate you knowing that that story was important to share, because it hasn't been easy to choose writing. It has not come easy. It has come at great costs. It has come at great humiliation and devastation, but it has been the very thing to help ground me and choose me. Because at any moment I could have thrown in a towel and say, "You know what, writing isn't for me. I'm not going to do this." But I have, and I still am choosing writing. I still am choosing me.
I love your story and even just this whole segment because that's the call to adventure, right? And so when I was thinking about just even as a sidebar, thinking about how to organize this podcast, it's like anytime we're embarking upon a particular journey, you can have a multitude of different journeys. I mean, journey for me in this context is the journey of life, but we have many journeys and trips along the way, kind of goads us or triggers us to go on a particular path. And I think it's so powerful and meaningful in the sense of just like there are all these things that are happening in your environment around buying the books, having these conversations. But it's so interesting that there's certain clues around a manifestation of a dream that you're having that sometimes you're not even cognizant of, that you're like, oh. So to your point where you look up and you're like, wow, I have all these books that are about these things. Your mind was subconsciously doing something because it was trying to express a passion or of yours, and you didn't even realize it until you just looked up and was like, oh. And I think your story about just the misstep in the corporate environment too, where there are trappings that are like that, that we as people of color, I've heard stories like that before, where you're thinking that you have a particular relationship with your manager or someone who is, a little bit has a little bit more influence in the organization. And you're thinking, oh, I have some latitude. And then it comes to bite you in the behind in a harsh way. But I think it's just really a testament to our experiences in which you are able to be resilient.
When I started the New York City Latina Writers Group in 2006, it came out of this need to have a space to tell our stories unapologetically without having to translate or explain ourselves or, whitewash it or whatever to make people feel comfortable. It was, we can come as we are with our stories, and we could be amongst women that get it.
Mm.
Like, we get it. And so from creating that space, right, it first started in 2006 with 6 women meeting in my apartment in Harlem, to growing from in 1 month to 30 people, from in 6 months to 100 people. And now 13 years later, the New York City Latina Writers Group has over 800 members.
Wow.
So from there, I began to create, for the past 7 years now, it's writing from the womb workshops, where I meet with writers, and it's either a 9-month session where we're writing for 9 months, and I'm helping them to give birth to a story from like inception to finish line. I'm helping them to dream it. I'm helping them to see the story that they might be missing, like asking them the right questions in the most loving, nurturing, supportive space, because they're not getting that in other spaces. So for me, I love I love that one of my writers is the one who called me the writer. You're the writing midwife, because she's like, with writing prompts and activities and just this space that I've created, I'm really proud of, because I've seen so many writers complete things and go on to publish things, and they're actors and filmmakers, and they're just taking their writing to just the next level, which is really, really dope.
Mhm. And I even think what you started to talk about with your work in terms of being a writer and a producer for AfroLatinos, the documentary, that's important in terms of you even coming into your fullness around embracing this, your self-identity as a Black person, more than just saying, oh, I'm of African descent. Because I think a lot of folks within the Latinx community do recognize, like, oh, okay, enslaved Africans came to this region along with the indigenous people that were already there and with the white colonizers. So yeah, of course, that's why we look this way, or our hair has this particular curl pattern, and my booty looks like this, and my music and my food, but that's about it, right? That's very different to say, oh yeah, there's some African descended people somewhere in my lineage. That's different from saying, no, I am an African descended person, whether you are asserting that as being Afro hyphenated, whatever, like Afro Ecuadorian or Afro Colombian, versus like I'm Black, which in and of itself means different things in different contexts, right? That's a very, very clear identities that I've always found interesting, being, with family that's of the Caribbean. And although we may all speak different languages across the region, it's just like, yo, there's this real tension around colorism. There's a real tension around embracing that. And that's deep for you to even come into your own with that, and then to be on the other side of the lens hearing people's stories. So you have your own story, but then you're hearing other people tell their story to you.
It's crazy to me how my journey of self-discovery and identity, and this, coming into myself, brought me to Afro-Latinos. Like, I intentionally wrote a story that was about bridging the Black-brown divide, so that I'm thinking Black girls and brown girls, we realize that we all Black.
Right.
Like, we all come from this place, and it was about this, like, this school of thought that the first woman came from Africa, like all of this. Like this is all of the things that I was embracing, studying, learning, and taking on as truth. Because we could know that mangu is an African word, and our booties are African, fine, but there is something very distinct about saying I'm a Black woman within Dominican culture, where many Black women aren't
Right.
identifying as Black. And so I think it is interesting because they haven't arrived to a place of being proud of that Blackness.
Now
Right.
that's heartbreaking.
Right. So like when I think about where we are as a people here in the US, and where there are a lot of African Americans who feel like, oh, now you want to be Black.
Right.
Now you want to be a part. Oh, now because it's a trend you want to identify, and where I'm talking about Afro-Latino, Afro-Latinidad. Now you want to be Black because it's cool. The truth of the matter is we've always been Black. We just have never loved it. Love being Black because we were told not to. We were told to hate the skin that we were born in, much like African Americans yesterday, who have come to, not all African Americans, but we've had that struggle within African American the community.
Right.
We know what that is, to want to lighten your skin and cleanse. That's not just happening here in the US. It's happening all over. Anywhere where there are Black folks, there is someone who is suffering an identity crisis and
Right.
uncertain about whether or not they should love the skin that they're in.
Right. Ain't that the truth? Because wherever we are in the world, I mean, there is some sort of colonial and post-colonial history that's
Absolutely.
there. I mean, even on the continent, slavery looked very different on this side of the world, the Western Hemisphere, but still even the post-colonial practice and how these countries were divided the way they were divided, who came and colonized them, plays a role in the ways in which that, to me, you're like, wow, like it's big business in places like Nigeria and Ghana and along the western coast of the continent around lightnings of skin.
It's devastating, but what I do love is that there are more and more and more people who are standing in their Blackness all over Latin America. There are a lot of movements, there are a lot of laws being passed finally, um, to protect people against racism and discrimination. I mean, it's still common practice in Latin America to have in your newspapers that they're looking for someone with buena presencia, good presence. And that, reading between the lines, that means that they really want someone who's light, who's white, a white Latino with straight hair or light eyes, for this job. And definitely don't be a Black person, a Black woman coming in here with kids, because they
Right.
definitely are asking you the most inappropriate questions on an interview. And so I feel like where I am, like, I love that you're asking about the film, that it has been interesting to be across from the people, the Afro Latinos, Afro Colombian, Afro Dominican, asking them about the experiences with identity, and those who are like not having it, right? Because there are people who are still like, I'm not Black.
Right. Dark as midnight. Like, oh, okay.
But then they're not Black, they're brown, they're mulatto. And so I know that my work here is to show people this is where we come from, this is our history, this is the truth. And I believe that I think that people need to have agency over their identity. And
Mm.
so I'm not here to like start this like Afro Latino movement. Like, you're either embracing your Blackness or you're not. And if you're not, I'm sad for you, because you'll never be like you're never going to be a whole person, because there's a part of you that you're denying, and ashamed of, because you haven't been taught the truth of who you are and where you come from. And so we like do our like civil rights movement and our Black power movement and our Black is beautiful movement. Like you see it more and more. Like there's a woman, she owns Miss Rizos. Her name is Caroline Contreras, but she has this movement where she started a salon and a school, so Black girls in DR could begin to embrace their hair and know how to take care of their hair. And so it's really empowering that I've learned about myself, and incredible work that I'm seeing happening.
There you have it, folks. This concludes part 1 of our conversation with Alicia Anabel Santos, La Santera. Stay tuned for the next episode, part 2, as she talks about the road and where we land. Peace.